I guess that's the thing about men that do this, people that do this, I should say. Something isn't wired correctly up here. Something is very, very, very wrong. Tanya Cash was born and raised in a suburb of Pittsburgh in the 1980s. Her parents, Jerry and Sherry, got a divorce when she was still little, and it was her dad, Jerry, who ended up getting full custody of her, which is not surprising when you learn about what Tanya's mom was really like. She was pretty absent and distant while also being toxic and kind of just flat out mean. Tanya would later say that she felt like her mother didn't want anything to do with her. By 1995, Tanya was 14 years old, and her dad moved in with his now new girlfriend, a woman called Joanne, and a woman who would later become Tanya's stepmother. And with living in a new place came enrolling in a new school, so Tanya would now be attending Cornell Middle School, where she would be entering 8th grade. And what happened in that school, a person that she met at that school, would change the trajectory of Tanya's life forever in the worst way possible. And I think we could all agree that being a new student at a new school is hard enough, but being a new student going into 8th grade is even harder. Because by then, at least in Tanya's case, it felt like everyone already had their own little friend group, and she found it really hard to feel like she belonged. She was a pretty shy person, she didn't know anyone, and she very quickly became a target for bullies. On top of that, things at home were not much better. Tanya was constantly clashing with Joanne, her father's new girlfriend. She also resented her father a little bit for making her move away from all of her friends. And overall, she just found herself feeling quite isolated and lonely. She was caught between a mother who was absent and violent and a father whose new life didn't seem to have room for her. So Tanya began acting out. She started hanging out with the wrong crowd, doing things that 8th graders should not be doing, and then she started sneaking out. And then she began running away from home. She would leave, but she would always come back within 24 hours. And every time that she left, her father, Jerry, would call the police to report her a missing person. Then she would return, and the cycle would repeat itself all over again. Tanya had no stability in her life. She felt like she had no one, and she was looking for someone, anyone, to be a friend. 38-year-old Thomas Hose was a security guard at Tanya's middle school. He was a familiar face in the hallway, someone that students were supposed to trust, someone whose job was literally to keep them safe. And he noticed Tanya, a vulnerable girl who was struggling, lonely, and desperate for attention, and what he saw was an opportunity. The two of them started to get to know each other a little bit more, and then it got to Thomas then randomly pulling her out of class just so they could talk. He was friendly, he was kind, he would make her laugh. Then he started buying her gifts. He would bring her candy and then snacks and then jewelry. Sometimes he would even give her money. And in Tanya's head, who was 13, 14 years old, all she was doing was innocently making a friend. But in Thomas' head, he knew what he was doing. He was 38 years old, and his intentions were nothing if not dangerous. One day, Thomas caught Tanya skipping class. Keep in mind, this guy is the security guard at her school, also twice her age. But immediately, Tanya thought that she was in trouble, but instead of reporting her, he did something else. He leaned in and he kissed her. And by that point, Tanya had already learned to trust this man. He was really the only person in her life who showed that he cared about her. No one else in her life gave her any attention or love, so this man right in front of her, acting like he truly has good intentions and acting like he wants to be the person that she loves, that she trusts. She's thinking, whoa, I love this guy. And throughout the next following month, the two of them began meeting up in a stairwell at the school to share even more kisses. And then it escalated until one day, Thomas tells Tanya that he has a good idea. He tells her that she should move in with him. And he phrased it in the way that he was like, I'm just trying to help you. I know you have trouble at home. I know that you run away often. I have a better solution. Move in with me. I could give you a better life, and with me, you will be safe. Very important detail, 38-year-old Thomas lived at his parents' house, lived with his parents. He also had previously been married, and he had a child. His son went to the same school as Tanya, the same school that he was a security guard at, and also lived at that same house. So on January 28th of 1996, when Thomas takes Tanya to his house for the very first time, he tells her to stay in one specific room so that his parents wouldn't see her. He told his son to not say anything. He also ends up introducing Tanya to one of his friends, Judith or Judy Sokol, a 57-year-old hairstylist who lived about 4 houses away from Thomas, and he kind of gave Judy the rundown of what the situation was, also kind of making it sound like he was a hero, because here he had this teenage girl who had a really bad life at home, so according to Thomas, he was doing the right thing by taking her in. By this point, Tanya is fully convinced that Thomas is in love with her and that he really wants the best for her. He convinces her to move out of her dad's house. And one morning in February, Jerry and Joanne wake up to find out that Tanya is gone, but they didn't freak out because she did have a history of running away. It wasn't until 4 days later, when Tanya still had not returned, that Jerry ended up calling the police like he had before to report his daughter missing. But because this was a common thing for Tanya, running away, very sadly, authorities didn't really make her disappearance a priority. But before taking Tanya to his own house, Thomas took her over to Judy's house, and Judy agreed to let her stay there for several weeks. So she did, and Thomas would go over there to hang out with them pretty frequently. And because Judy was a hairdresser, she later dyed Tanya's hair to change her appearance so others wouldn't recognize her. It was at Judy's house that Thomas essayed Tanya for the very first time. After that, Thomas decided that it was time for Tanya to move into his house permanently. For the next decade, Thomas's house would be Tanya's prison. He hid Tanya in his second floor bedroom. She was forbidden to leave. She couldn't go downstairs. She wasn't allowed to open any windows. She couldn't make any noise. His parents lived underneath the same room, and yet they had no idea that she was there, or so they claimed. Tanya later explained, quote, "I had to sneak up to his bedroom. We were in his room, very quiet. His parents were there. They didn't know I was in the house. He took full control once he knew that I was in his grasp," end quote. Tanya was not allowed to go to the bathroom because she was not allowed to leave the bedroom, so she would use a metal bucket as a toilet, and throughout the next 10 years she was there, she only ever had 3 buckets. She would only get to shower once or twice a week, late at night when Thomas's parents were asleep, and only when he snuck her out of the bedroom and escorted her down to the cellar to take a shower in the bathroom. She, of course, was not allowed to go downstairs to eat, so she had no real meals. Tanya would pretty much only eat whatever Thomas had from his leftovers, which were usually just scraps, and she only weighed 93 pounds at one point. He also taught her which floorboards creaked so that she wouldn't step on those, so that she wouldn't make any noise and alert anyone of her presence. And most days she would just lay in bed to avoid making any noise, either reading, watching TV at a very low volume, or listening to music with headphones on, because the most important thing was to remain silent. Daily, Thomas essayed Tanya. He also had her keep a calendar book documenting this, a detailed written record of the essay, so he could, quote, brag to coworkers and friends about how often he was active. He would brag to his coworkers, who were employees at the middle school that Tanya once attended. At the beginning, Tanya was manipulated enough that she would have excused everything. Everything that she thought was happening to her was love. Then when it began to really take a toll on her, not only emotionally and mentally, but also physically, she accepted that she did not like what was happening to her. But still, she excused it to make Thomas happy. She would sacrifice her own happiness to please him. But then it got to the point where enough was enough, and the way that she was living and the things that he was doing to her, it became too much. It was breaking her. She became a shell of the person that she once was, and she was absolutely miserable. Then the nice act that Thomas was putting up was no longer, and he became really, really mean really, really fast. He would say insane things to Tanya to get her to stay. Whenever she tried to leave, he would threaten to get rid of her permanently and completely. He would tell her that he could do it in her sleep, then throw her in a garbage bag and throw that in the river where nobody would find her. He would tell her that nobody wanted her, that she was stupid, that he was the only person in the entire world that cared about her, and that he was not only capable of getting rid of her, but also her entire family if she did something that he considered to be out of line. And of course, the things that he would tell her would get into her head. When he would tell her that no one cared about her, no one wanted her, no one would go looking for her, she believed him because she was a missing person. In the eyes of the authorities, she had been, yet no one really bothered to look for her. She was declared a runaway, and that was kind of that. From February of 1996 to the spring of 2000, for 4 years, Tanya Cash did not leave that bedroom. But after those 4 years, Thomas decided to change his tactics. He created essentially a new identity for Tanya, started calling her Nikki Diane Allen, and he told his family that this Nikki was his girlfriend and that she would be moving in with them. His parents accepted this story, I guess, and shockingly, no one questioned why this girlfriend had suddenly just kind of appeared out of nowhere and now she was living with them. But enough time had passed that resulted in Thomas now having brainwashed Tanya so completely that he knew that she wouldn't run away, which meant that he could now let her out of the bedroom, and he allowed her to go outside and live as this new person, as his girlfriend, Nikki. Thomas would give Tanya instructions if she was going out, which would only be if he decided that she could, and obviously on his schedule, but he would give her money. He would tell her exactly what bus to catch, where to walk, where to shop for clothing, and which bus to catch to come back home. And Tanya followed his instructions, and she would come back every time, just like he knew that she would. Quote, "It was scary, but it felt good to be out and to breathe in fresh air. But it was scary because I was like a deer in headlights out in the world. I hadn't been out in 4 years," end quote. Actually, the first time that she left the house was for her birthday, because for her birthday, she wanted new clothes, given that she was now 18 years old and she had been wearing the same clothing from middle school and or Thomas's clothing since she had been there. Fast forward to 2005 when Thomas allowed Tanya to get a part-time job at JJ Deli Mart, a local convenience store owned by a husband and wife. Well, I guess Thomas didn't really allow it. Tanya later admitted that she got this job behind his back, but he would just think that she was going there to hang out often, I guess. But what she was really doing was bonding with the people at the deli, the owner Joe and his wife Janet and their daughter. And for the very first time, she saw something that she had never seen before, a healthy, loving family relationship. She watched Joe interact with his wife and daughter with kindness, respect, genuine love and affection. She was seeing what a family should be like. And for the first time in 10 years, Tanya realized that what she she had with Thomas was not love. It was everything but. She slowly but surely started trusting Joe and his family. After all, they seemed like really lovely, nice, trustworthy people. And in the way that Tanya was learning about them, they were also learning about her. And it wasn't long before Joe could sense that something was wrong, something was off about Tanya. One of the biggest things that made Joe question that something suspicious, something weird was going on was when Tanya didn't know her social security number, which Joe needed to be able to enroll her as an employee, but she had no clue what it was or where to find it. One day in 2006, Tanya broke down crying at work. Joe asked her what was wrong, and Tanya, who had been silent for 3,692 days, finally told the truth. Through tears streaming down her face, she told Joe, quote, "My real name is not Nikki Allen. My real name is Tanya Cash. If you go to a website for missing children, you will see a picture of me there." Joe could not believe his ears. I have goosebumps, but he was going to help Tanya. He told her to go back to the house one last time. Quote, "Don't do anything out of the ordinary. I will take care of everything. You need to go back there to that house one more time. Don't let on what's happening. Just act normal until the police get there," end quote. So Tanya goes back to Thomas's house. While Joe then called the missing children hotline, he also contacted his son, who was a retired police officer and was familiar with Tanya's case. And finally, on March 21st of 2006, police arrived at 1716 Soul Street. Tanya Cash walked out of that house for the very last time. Quote, "I'll never forget how it felt to step out of the house that day. I got into the cop car, took a deep breath, and thought, it's over, I'm free." She was 24 years old. She had spent 10 years, 1 month, and 11 days in captivity. A week later, Tanya went back to go see Joe and his family, and they had a tearful reunion at JJ Deli's Mart. Joe hugged Tanya and later told reporters, quote, "I love her. I consider her my daughter. She wanted to find her dad again, and I'm so happy that I could do that for her. She asked me for help, and I gave it to her," end quote. The day after her rescue, Tanya was reunited with her father, Jerry, at the police station in Elizabeth, Pennsylvania. They hadn't seen each other in a decade. Quote, "We cried, we laughed. It was a plethora of emotions," said Jerry. They went home and they celebrated with cake, and for a very brief moment, it seemed like a happy ending, but it wasn't, because later on, Jerry, her father, would put some blame on Tanya for the last decade of her life. It felt like Jerry nor Joanne believed Tanya's story. They just thought it, quote, didn't add up. They questioned why she didn't leave sooner, and despite Tanya only being 14 years old when she was taken and severely brainwashed, her father believed that she was partly responsible for what happened. According to Tanya, her father told her, "You knew what you were doing." Tanya replied, "Dad, I was 14. Since 2011 and to this day, Tanya and her father do not speak. As far as Thomas goes, he was 48 years old at the time of his arrest, and he was charged with many things, including charges for the SA, interference with custody of a child, and endangering the welfare of a child. But he was not charged with kidnapping because Tanya initially had gone with him willingly. He was released on a $200 bail and suspended without pay from the middle school where he continued to work. Judy, his neighbor friend, was also arrested with 4 separate charges for helping conceal Tanya's identity and keeping the situation a secret. June 26th of 2007 was sentencing day. This is a quote from Tanya directed to Thomas, quote, "You took away my innocence, my childhood. You made me think my family didn't want me or love me, that no one cared or loved me but you. For 10 years, you controlled me." She continued to say that she was no longer his puppet and that she had completed her GED and her first semester of college. Quote, "I plan to go places. The main thing I want to do is help protect children and women from men like you," end quote. Thomas Host was sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison, and he was released from prison in February of 2022 after serving 15 years. And he still lives in that same house. Like, he still wakes up, takes showers, goes to bed like a normal person living in that same house. Judy pleaded guilty, and she was sentenced to 2 to 23 months in prison. And we don't know when she got out, but she definitely never took responsibility for any of her actions. What I am happy to tell you is that Tanya has come a very long way since. She did finish her GED, she attended college, and co-wrote a book about her experience in 2017 called Memoir of a Milk Carton Kid, the Tanya Nicole Cash story. In 2018, she married the love of her life, and today she has a happy, loving, and supporting family, including stepchildren and grandchildren. And today, Tanya still speaks at schools and organizations about her experience. She advocates for missing and exploited children across the country. And she wants others who have experienced trauma to know, quote, "There is light at the end of the tunnel. You always have to hold on to that hope," end quote. Yeah, insane story. So happy, obviously, that she got out. it's so hard to imagine that like things like this happen. No matter how many times I read stories like this, I am always baffled to my core. Anyway, that is all for me today. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Tanya's story. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.